My fair lady, into the snows of the Bjornling's home turf do the Knights of Bretonnia march. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and a red dawn, and in their vanguard the royal hippos rule the skies, providing overwatch for their brothers below. It's Monty Python versus the Orc Menace in this one, with both armies bringing out the big guns, and the Greenskins crumping and stumping with some big uns. Wurrzag the Great Green Prophet and a giant at the helm. Pretty interesting army compositions here. I am playing as Bretonnia, and XMT Gobbo Slayer has betrayed his people and allied with them. So for my build, I wanted to give Grail Guardians and Royal Hippogryph Knights a shot, and the Fay Enchantress has incredible synergy with both. The heals are obvious, regrowth, Earthblood pretty good, but Favor of the Fay is a plus 40 melee attack buff that lasts forever, and it will turn Elite Knights into absolute meat grinders. Also have Flesh to Stone to keep them survivable if they get surrounded by their incoming Wa. Nothing too special on the infantry side, 3 foot squires and a bunch of men-at-arms to drown our enemies in a tide of peasant blood. 2 Grail Guardians for their incredible resilience and staying power, and the linchpin of this army are the Royal Hippogryph Knights, fresh out the Pegasus Eries of Paraval. Really cool unit, probably my favorite in the entirety of the roster, tons of killing power and terror, but if there's one thing I'd like to see them change with Hippogryph Knights at this point, it's giving them Living Saints. They should have immunity to vigor, just like the other Knights of the Grail. This unit is not OP, it doesn't need a price change. Staying fresh into the late game would go a long way in making them a more common sight, because as it stands, there are simply cheaper, less risky, and more cost-efficient options on the roster. 3 Mounted Yeomen to round out the rest of the build, and for Gobbo Slayer and the Greenskins, this is an interesting army. Definitely an experimental, fun type of build. Certainly not meta, but definitely something worth trying. It's 5 big guns with 2 gold chevrons each, which is going to turn them into freaks of nature in melee. Almost 50 melee attack base, and that's before bonus versus large and that 42 weapon strength enter the equation. So sacrificing some durability here by not going Black Orcs. They don't have shields and only have 50 armor, but they can carve their way through infantry and cav alike as long as they don't get cycle charged into oblivion. That's why there are 3 boar boys and a giant, a big dumbass giant in the center with Wurrzag the Great Green Prophet at the helm. You'll typically see Queen Mama Spider instead of a giant because the Spiderlings are so good for shutting down archer play, but giants play a similar role at a cheaper price point. So as long as you don't let them get shot up by arrows all day, you could be in pretty good shape. Wurrzag does not have his Bonewood staff, just to keep him a little bit more cost efficient and afford a few more of those gold chevrons. On the big guns, the Mounted Yeomen are going to harass the flanks as this battle begins. The Warlord boys in the center, armor sundering, pretty good Gobbo unit, not unbreakable like the 8-peak loonies, but they can be pretty nasty when they charge into melee with peasants. So what I want to do at the start of the game is focus fire down those big guns on the flank. Again, they don't have that missile block chance, they don't have shields, so getting in on both sides and pin cushioning them, making them a bit weaker so when the Grail Guardians and peasants charge into melee, they might break, would be pretty nice. So we're going to shoot them down. Shooting the giant in the center, not easy, because there's a lot of cav in the back that can kind of move my stuff backwards, and obviously Gobbo Slayer are going to be using those Gobbos to kind of screen and prevent the yeomen from getting easy shots in. And that's pure textbook. If you're ever worried about skirmish cav shooting your elites, position some cheap meat shields in between them and zone them out. As your infantry pushes outward, the skirmishers will be forced to retreat, and they'll waste a lot of time trying to find a new avenue of attack. Now, the big thing I'm worried about in this battle is Wurrzag the Great Green Prophet. He's the best Greenskins lord in a lot of situations, very much so against Bretonnia, because he can pin units of 1600 or 2000 gold knights in place, and then Foot of Gork them into the next dimension. There's no way to avoid it. You will get netted and Foot of Gork at some point. It just needs to be in a melee fight that would otherwise be advantageous for you as Bretonnia. When the Righteous Boot comes down, like that Giants, you gotta be ready to heal the models that weren't squished like bugs. So, the Giant is gonna move right up the center, and immediately it'll be Terror Route City. I mean, everything on my front line, as soon as Wob pops, is just gonna start breaking instantly. The Giant is gonna Kryptonian Superman breath them all into oblivion, and the Grail Guardians are gonna be fighting out on the flanks, trying to get rid of the annoying Gobbos that we can then hammer and anvil in the center and break the big guns. But to do that, first gotta get rid of the meat shield. So Guardians getting aggressive over on the left side, charging into the goblins there. Grail Guardians on my right side, kind of hanging back for now, waiting to see if Effigy of the Git and Foot of Gork combo is going to drop anytime soon. And I'll be very patient with the Royal Hippogryph Knights. Don't want to go in too early and commit when it could get bad. Now, the Giant just ripped off a dude's head. Just straight up fee-fi fo fummed his way in there and bit a poor peasant's face off. Not a fun way to go. And more tear routes incoming as the Foot Squires commit. I'm going to avoid the Giant if I can, charging past to get a charge on the big guns. But yeah, with the Warlord boys and their armor sundering in there, that will also be a really bad fight for the Foot Squires. Infantry grind, just not going to go the way of Bretonnia. It never will. Waspots, Guardians still separating the wheat from the chaff, and the peasants are dying in record numbers. Go figure. The Knights gotta make their move soon, or there won't be any anvil left. So, while Royal Hippos are certainly not a top-tier competitive pick, the potential upside for this unit is still sky high. In the right situation, they can unleash some pretty serious devastation, and this is just a gorgeous engagement. Overcast Earthblood, beautiful surround off on the Greenskin blob, effigy of Degit goes down, Orc boys routing immediately after the Hippogryph charge, and yeah, that's a foot of Gork. The alley-oop from Kobe to Shaq, and look at the HP bar on the Grail Guardians plummet. Lost about 12 models, regrowth going their way to get them back up to about half HP or so, just to keep those models that are still alive in the fight. And it's good that they didn't have to stick around in melee combat, because that's where you're going to lose the unit. If they're forced to stay in with the big guns when their HP drops that low, that's where you're going to lose all the models. The fact that I was able to pull away and get a regrowth off means that it won't be too devastating for me. And as you can see, Grail Guardians in the background are back to about half HP. Now, my other Grail Guardian unit on the right flank, thinking about getting a full hammer and anvil off, and yeah, it's coming in. It's going to be real juicy. Grail Guardians do not have the impact that Grail Knights have off of the charge, but they are better in sustained melee combat. That's how we're going to use them here. Kind of like Katana Cavalry in Shogun 2, stick them in, use them more like a sword infantry unit that has some mobility. So the Giant is still causing havoc everywhere. Haven't really been able to focus fire him down much at all, and everything in the center has been tear routed. So the Greenskins really focused all their power there and have done a great job. But now they're going to collapse in and around Wurrzag, make sure he can't get sniped out. And the Mounted Yeomen have one job at this point. That is to bring down the Giants. They are not a super high DPS skirmisher cav, but what they can do is focus fire on a Giant. When you got 3 Mounted Yeomen, that'll certainly be enough to wreck him pretty bad. Grail Guardians clearing out some more of the Gobos, slamming into them, tossing their salad, and they'll go flying to the edge of the map, and that should be the end of the Gobos on the right flank. So I haven't done it perfectly this game, but against enemies that are much better in melee than you typically want to create a formation that is defense in depth, where maybe only 2 or 3 of your infantry are fighting at any given time. This delays the opponent, forces them to cut through multiple layers of your army, as opposed to engaging and smashing everything at once. And so my reserves are being deployed, holding out much better than the initial lines, because the Greenskins are beginning to tire, and Predators are circling overhead, like thunderbolts from Mount Olympus, smiting those who would dare defy my scimitar-lobbing Moisten Bint. The Hippogryph Knights will strike from above, and they're going to tear rout everything as they get their rear charge off. Now, when I say everything, I mean just the stuff I hit in the rear. The rest of the big guns are coming in now, and that is a savage wall of epic proportions. So many Greenskins left, but the Warlord boys just melt. Actually, that was just regular Gobos. It was regular Night Goblins, not the Warlord boys. Actually, the Warlord boys, if they had received that charge, might have survived because they have immunity to Psych, but regular Night Goblins do not, and they broke immediately. It's going to be a favor of the Fay for that plus 40 melee attack. They're now up to 86 melee attack. So sexy, doll. And they're going to rip through everything, and my god, it's going to destroy all those Greenskins with another foot of Gork coming down. The Grail Guardians just got smashed apart. Second nice foot of Gork cast, but neither have been truly epic and just deleted my cav from the game, which is what you want if you're Wurrzag. You can one-shot even elite knights if you get a good cast off where they're a little bit too blob, but I've kept my knights pretty spread out, and both times he foot of Gorked, they were committed to melee where there's a bit of friendly fire potential as well, so he had to be a little bit more conservative in his placement of those foots of Gork. So the Giant is now isolated and has escaped from the rest of the box. Not a lot of infantry helping him out at the moment, and I realize with Mounted Yeomen firing, I've gotten him pretty low. Hippogryph Knights charge in, and they are going to deliver that coup de grace, with Fay Enchantress maybe getting the killing blow there. Not actually sure. She might have been the one to deliver that fatal strike, but the giant's dead, and with him, Wurrzag is going to be in a pretty precarious position. Flyers are still alive, and they can hound the flanks with impunity at this point. The Boar Boys are donezo after the rear charge from the Hippos, and they are feasting right now. This is that upper bound I was talking about, that upper echelon that Royal Hippogryph Knights can kind of provide you in the right situation. There are few Bretonnian units that can unleash this kind of DPS, and they're having a whale of a time right now. They are blasting apart the Greenskin Wall. And I'm not in much of a rush at this point. Anything that breaks off from the center can be run down by Grail Guardians. I did lose one of my cab units there to those Foots of Gork, the Foot Squires, and the Guardians breaking off, but the Hippogryph Knights can just go in. I mean, they do not have enough to stop them at this point, especially when I've got Flesh to Stone active. Plus 60 armor gets them up to 150. That's higher than it's a Steam Tank 160. It's basically Steam Tank levels of tankiness. Got a rear charge coming in from behind, and that is one of the issues with big guns when you're dealing with 150 armor Hippogryph Knights, which honestly you don't typically expect to see, but big guns can't deal with that. They don't have enough armor piercing. Their choppas just can't bypass all that physical resist and all that armor. So Hippogryph Knights were amazing that game, almost 190 kills. Grail Guardians weren't too far behind. Obviously, the one that got Foot of Gork twice didn't have quite as much fun, but still ended up earning a chevron. And I think you can see the synergy that the Fay brings to the table in regards to all those knights. Whether you're talking about the Hippogryph Knights or the Grail Guardians, that plus 40 melee attack, the regrowths, the Flesh to Stones, the Earthbloods, all of it together makes for a pretty nasty combination. And when they can let you run through a lot of Greenskins infantry. On the flip side, XMT Gabo Slayer was definitely experimenting. This is not his core meta counter Bretonnia army, but I think there are ideas there that could certainly help out. I personally wouldn't go for a big on core, but if you're going to, Gold Chevron on them gets their leadership, their melee attack, and their stats in general super high. And there's a lot to be said for an infantry unit that can easily carve its way through any Bretonnian infantry they can field and also deal with the cav. Typically, that is going to be Black Orcs. That's why you typically see 3 or 4 of them in this matchup. But big guns can do that role super well, and they're also a bit cheaper too. In that battle, I think the best way to use the Orc Boar Boys would have been to keep one in reserve, wait till the Grail Guardians are about to commit, countercharge them, effigy of the Git at the same time, get a full charge bonus off where the Guardians aren't able to drop Foot of Gork. In that situation, you can easily disengage and then get a full Foot of Gork with no friendly fire whatsoever. Certainly could have helped out. I'm not sure it would have been enough. Shelob is better than Giant, but overall, fun build. Really enjoyed it. GG to Gabo Slayer.